I think when people think about their path to success, very often they remember all the struggle to get there. And that's often what makes them feel like, well, I'm not the person that can teach this because, I didn't get here in one leap. It wasn't obvious. I've had to kind of fight and struggle and get all scrappy to learn what it takes here. But that's exactly where the value comes from in that part of the journey. So I think that's one of the things that can be really difficult for us to see because from our perspective, there's more failure than success. But from the outside, it is perhaps the other way around. But we miss that journey of errors is the value that we've developed. Hello, and welcome to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, business coach and value whisperer. And on this show, we explore value whispering, the smarter way to market your small business in a way that feels aligned and sustainable instead of loud or pushy, making it an approach that just happens to be brilliant for introverts. Now, today's episode is a little bit special because this week the tables are turned and I'm the one being interviewed. My guest host is Helen von Dadelszen, who was actually my very first client for the process that then went on to become the Value Whispering Blueprint, my signature program. She is also a published author and a brilliant presentation coach. So the questions she brings are thoughtful, insightful, and beautifully grounded in real experience. What makes this conversation extra special right now is that my book, Value Whispering, The Smarter Way to Market Your Small Business, launched this week. It's hot off the press. Helen has read it. And as a listener of the show and a reader of the book, she's asking the questions that you yourself might be asking as you read the book. And we go deeper into the thinking behind some of the ideas, particularly those that stood out and resonated to Helen, given her experience, and how some of those ideas have evolved since Helen first experienced them and what they look like in practice. We also reflect on Helen's journey through the Value Whispering Blueprint, what shifted for her, what surprised her, and what it's really like to clarify and communicate your value from the inside out. This is very much a behind the scenes conversation. You'll hear stories and insights you won't find anywhere else, as well as ideas that give another dimension to the book. So if you're currently reading the book, if you've been thinking about reading the book, or if you're just simply curious about what value whispering is all about and what it looks like in real life, you're going to love this episode. So hi, Helen. Thank you so much for being here and agreeing to do this as the Blueprint OG. You were the original blueprinter. So I'm so excited that you've read the book and you've agreed to come and discuss it from your perspective as someone who has lived the book as well as reading it as well. So I'm excited and nervous for what you have in mind.
Oh, you shouldn't be nervous. Actually, being nervous is fine. You should read my book to understand more about that. I'll just put a plug in right away. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Melitta. Your book was very informative and very easy to read. And it's really encouraged me to redo some of those exercises that we did many years ago together. And I know that you've refined them along the way as well. But for your listeners, most of them probably know a little bit about you. You have a journey from corporate communications and you've now a coach. And that shift has been really interesting to witness along the way. But what I'd really like to know is, what was that moment when you realized what you were really helping people to do wasn't to help with their messaging and their communications, but it was to do with value itself?
Yeah, great question. I think it's always been that way throughout my career, doing marketing, communications, and then internal communication, leadership communication. But it wasn't necessarily so clear to me that that's what it was until, in the book, I shared the story of when I met Anna, because I was networking and at the time I was doing communication consultancy. So I was working with a lot of the top leaders for some of these large companies, helping them with their communications. And then people were asking me, oh, well, can you help me with my small business? I was like, no, And I didn't quite understand what they were asking. I thought they were asking me to help them with their small business strategy. And at that time, I was thinking, well, it's all strategy and numbers and things like that. But then with this particular lady, Anna, was like, you're the only one that can help me. You have to say yes. Like, okay, what are you seeing that I'm missing? And it was really that she explained that what she felt she was missing was anytime she spoke about her business to people who she knew needed her services, they just weren't getting it. They were like, well, that's nice, and walking away. And she just so frustrated, she didn't know how to market and communicate what she did. And then I realized, well, actually, that is something I can help with. But it's on the reflection that was like, okay, it's not the communication per se, but the communicating of the value that was the missing link. And my degree, so I went to art school and I did a degree in design management, which was all about how do you translate a corporate need into communication, but not just the words, in the whole way that someone experiences an idea. And that's how you can really communicate the value of something. So I wanted people to not just have pretty words on a page, because from a lot of my consultancy work, when I worked with small business owners, I would write their websites and their brochure and give them all those words, but it didn't work because it wasn't them. In fact, I stopped working for small business owners for that very reason, because it needed to come through them. It really needed to express and start that relationship, that unique relationship between them and their dream client. And so I wanted to be able to help small business owners to understand, well, what is that value that they uniquely can bring to that person, and how can they start to communicate that not only through their words, but through the way that that person felt in their presence, and to build that sort of influence and not really persuasion, but people would just see you as their obvious choice, and it would just feel very natural. And I felt, selling yourself is weird. Marketing yourself when you are your business is really difficult to put your hand up and say, oh, I'm amazing. But when you can embody that message and people feel it, then it's a very different experience. And as I said, it's the start of that relationship with the next person. So reflecting on what Anna felt she needed, and knowing that, yeah, just helping them have the perfect messaging, perfect marketing plan wasn't going to be enough, that it had to really express their value. That was something that was actually very clear from day one, that had to be the case. And so that was perhaps the hardest part, was not just taking people through the development of their messaging and marketing plan, but how do you layer things into that so that they appreciate their value, feel really confident that they're in the right place, doing the right thing for the right people, and can action that plan on a regular basis with the tools they already have and being the person they already are. So yeah, did that answer the question?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The word that keeps coming to me as you're speaking is alignment.
Yes.
To find what is that unique, and you give a beautiful metaphor of a diamond that is a rock and need to chip away at, and then you allow it to shine. And if you're able to find the way of speaking or understanding yourself and what you bring to the world and what you're going to bring to your dream client, and align the messaging and everything, actually every touch point with that, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. And I love that you picked out that analogy, because the reason that particular analogy was so important to me was the end result, that you have this polished diamond that's been shaped beautifully. But what happens with a diamond when the light hits it, it doesn't just, you don't do an action and you get a result. It goes in all different directions. And some of those beams of lights are really tiny, but they go super far. And when they touch a surface, it turns into this lovely rainbow. And I just feel that when you are in alignment and you're embodying your value and you're putting that out there all the while, you just don't know just how far that impact is going to go and who it's going to touch. But you can trust that it's out there living in the world. And I know from the feedback that I've had from people that they've just read a LinkedIn post and clicked through to something or other, and then that helped them through one thing that they were really struggling with in that moment. And then they've sent me a message to say thank you. And sometimes they've sent me gifts. And these are people I don't really know, and they're not paying clients, but just by embodying my value and always being focused on bringing that out in the world, it's making a difference. And I think that's where we start to create meaning and fulfillment as well, because when people can become a paying client, of course we can help them on a much deeper level, but that doesn't mean that we can't already just put this incredible value out in the world and make a positive difference. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, through everything you do. In fact, it's not just about the marketing and the sales, it's about who you are and the value that you're giving professionally and personally, right? Being solid in that, and then aligning your actions towards that and the way that you communicate as well, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of times people think about, well, this is my plan and this is who I'm becoming and this is the direction I'm going to. But I think it's much more powerful if you think, well, that's who I already am. This is the place I'm coming from. So then every action is already making a difference, already having an impact before anything else happens. And I think that's just such a more motivating space to go from, where everything you do isn't just about promoting and getting clients. That's a happy side effect of you just being you and the most valuable version of yourself every day, but without having to change who you are. It's really just bringing that diamond to the surface.
Yeah. In the introduction, you say, or you ask really powerful questions. Who has ever taught how to communicate professionally, let alone to communicate the one thing that most makes them brilliant? Who has ever taught to celebrate what they have to offer without coming across as pushy or arrogant? So I wanted to turn that question around and ask you, who taught you to celebrate your own value without feeling pushy? And then why do you think it's so difficult, so hard for people, especially women, to do that?
Oh, where to begin with that question? It's a great question. Um, well, I think I missed my value for a very long time. Being, if anyone's read my first book, The Shy Girl's Guide to Networking, I grew up being shy and quiet. And honestly, that strategy served me very well. I was a good girl. I got my head down. I got work done. I did well at school. I got through university. I got a great job. So it wasn't necessarily a bad strategy until I think I was 25 and I'd lost my dream job after 6 weeks of being in that role. So, and I just went for so many interviews and I was getting nowhere. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm perfect for each of these jobs that's coming up. And yeah, I'm just always getting all of these no's. And then I went for one particular interview. I talk about it more in the book and in my TED talks. I won't my TEDx talk. I won't go into it more here, but basically I got thrown out of that interview, accused of lying because I kept saying we did this and we did that. And I wasn't owning my value. And I left that interview, cried all the way home because it felt like the end of the world, and cried pretty much for the next 3 days and just sort of like, this is hopeless. I'm never going to get a job. And then it dawned on me that this woman that threw me out, she was right. I hadn't stolen credit from other people, but I just hadn't stood up for my own value. I hadn't really talked about how I had developed certain strategies, why the results of that. And so for my next interview, it was for a role for one of the biggest organizations in the UK at the time, and for a role I'd never done before. So really the odds were against me because I'd only worked in like smaller organizations up to that point. But I just went through everything. It's like, okay, why does my previous experience feed into this? What exact examples can I give? What didn't work but taught me something valuable for this role? I really unpacked everything to find the value that I could bring to this role, because I couldn't say, oh yes, I've done all of these things before, but I could 100% say how I could bring value to this role and grow into it. And yeah, they were blown away. By the time I got home, I got the job, and they were on my first day, they were just like, that was the best interview we have ever had. They were kicking each other under the desk not to give me the job on the spot. So that was a moment where I realized, in owning my value and sharing it, not in a way that's braggy or arrogant, but in a way that's clear, you become the obvious choice. And every day in that role, I was able to hone that then. And it just clicked something. But it also made me really sensitive to when other people are burying their value. Like when people say, oh, I just do this little thing. We hear that all the time. Or, oh, it just happened to work out. It's like, no, it didn't. You did something to make that happen. And I've been a bit annoying, I think, in some cases, where people have just really buried their values. Like, you're not see that bit there, that's super valuable. You need to recognize that. So now I do it for my clients in an official way, so it's not annoying, it's helpful. But I think we just miss it all the time because we're not taught how to do it, as you said. And when I worked for that company and I moved to Geneva and worked for them here, I got engaged in leadership communication training. So I coached the top 60 leaders within this organization on leadership communication. And I would say about 60% of them were terrified of communicating because they were worried they would get it wrong. They didn't know what to say, and they'd never been taught this stuff. Even though they were the top leaders in this huge organization, they didn't have that confidence. So it made me realize, when I was developing the Value Whispering Blueprint, that I didn't just have to help people understand their value and how to communicate that, but there's a skills gap and a confidence gap on top of each other. So we had to help them believe in it, to give them some communication tools so they know how to do it in a way that isn't arrogant but works. So we had to bring all of these elements. See, I almost said we.
I heard that. I was going to pull you up on it. Careful.
No, it's only me. Yeah, so I had to really bring all of this together to make it easy for people to identify that value and embody it. But I think, particularly as girls, when we're playing as kids, if a group of girls are playing and a girl is really good at a particular game, they'll change the game so it's fair for everybody. Whereas boys, if they're playing and a boy is particularly good at a game, they're like, oh, you're amazing, man. And they'll all get really excited about this guy and tell him he's brilliant. We don't get taught that as girls. Nobody's telling us you're amazing at this. In fact, if you are really good and stand out, you're almost shamed and told, no, you can't use that because it's not fair to everyone else. So, right from these early days, and it's a natural thing, we're just not taught to share it. But if we don't share our value, people don't get it, and we can't use that to help other people. And all of my clients, I was going to say 90%, I was like, no, all of my clients, everybody in my community, and I bet everyone listening to this podcast, started their business to help people. But the only way we can do that is if we're really clear about what that value is and how we can do it in a way that's different. Then we're going to be able to really focus that on having the impact that we're going to feel proud of, the impact that's really needed in the world. So many reasons why it's difficult, but it's the only way we're going to make a difference and use that value and create an impact we feel proud of. So it's so important to take the steps to find that value and believe in it.
So there's so much inner work that needs to happen, right, before you figure out what you're saying and what you're selling. So you coined quite a few phrases in your book. One of the most important ones is true value in chapter 1. And I love the subtitle of that chapter: no matter how soft your voice, you can create a powerful impact. And to find your true value, you describe it as it's a blend of talents, experiences, lessons, values. What's one practical way that maybe someone listening, could start uncovering that true value if they feel really stuck?
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons why it's hard for people to identify is because there's so much within that. So, typically people will look at their values and they'll stop there. And that's great. But that's one, your values is really, it guides you, but it's not everything about what you bring to your clients. That's a lot of your learning, your experience, your natural skills and talents. But a big part comes from all the mistakes we've made. That's what's really taught us what it takes to succeed and all the different facets of that. So our failures are really something that we should be digging into that information, and it's just a rich source of growth within that failure, those failure moments. And I think when people think about their path to success, very often they remember all the struggle to get there. And that's often what makes them feel like, well, I'm not the person that can teach this because, I didn't get here in one leap. It wasn't obvious. I've had to kind of fight and struggle and get all scrappy to learn what it takes here. But that's exactly where the value comes from in that part of the journey. So I think that's one of the things that can be really difficult for us to see, because from our perspective, there's more failure than success. But from the outside, it's perhaps the other way around. But we miss that journey of errors is the value that we've developed. And one of the ways to start seeing that is to look at your feedback. So when people give you feedback and testimonials, then often you'll start to see the value as they see it. And you mentioned their true value. And what I see as the true value is all of your value, but how can you use that to make a difference? So particularly, you don't get to our age and you haven't had so many experiences, so much value. And this is why a lot of people find it hard to define what is my value, because you have so much of it. But we're going to focus it down to, well, what's the value that you can use to make the impact you want to have for the people you want to help. So you start to give yourself a bit of focus. But yeah, looking at the feedback from others is often the shortcut to finding what that value really is.
I love that. But coming back to the failure and the importance of that, can you share maybe a personal failure that has contributed to helping you understand your own value? You've already shared with us the story of that disastrous interview, and actually you should thank the interviewers for giving you that light bulb moment. But is there anything else you can share with us in terms of what failure has personally taught you along the way?
There have been so many. I think maybe the biggest one that springs to mind is in my first business. So I left the corporate world, not to start my own business, but to be a mom because I couldn't get childcare. So it wasn't ever part of my plan. And then I just happened to meet someone for lunch, and I was saying, oh, maybe I could just write newsletters for companies in nap times. That's something I could do. It wouldn't be too difficult, and I could manage that. And then she just happened to know someone that was looking for someone to write a newsletter. And so she put me in touch. It happened to be someone that I already knew through all my networking. So I had my first client on that very first day. But I was like, maybe I could do this. So I was like, great, that's what I'll do. But, there wasn't really the process I take my clients through now. I hadn't done any of that. So I started writing newsletters very quickly. The clients I had for that could see that I knew what I was talking about when it came to communication. And then they started to appreciate that I understood strategy, leadership, communication, all of these different areas. So it just grew and grew and grew. And these clients were corporate clients, so they paid extremely well. So I just kept saying, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that, because I could. And I could do it, and I could do it very well and better than a lot of people out there, better than the alternatives. But I never stopped to ask, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Is this meaningful? And after 8 years of doing that, I started to really burn out. Getting up in the morning was a real struggle. My kids were here. We have the kids have a diary that they come home with. I don't know if you have it.
Yes.
Same
Yeah.
thing, Helen. And every day there's a note from the teacher, and every day the note was like, your child was late for school again today. And I was like, that's not done here in Switzerland. And I was like, I know they were late because I couldn't get myself out of bed. And looking back, I think I was heading for burnout, but I think I was borderline depressed as well.
Mm.
Everything became a chore, it became a struggle, and it just wasn't fun. Then I read a quote from Sir Richard Branson and said, if it's no longer fun, stop doing it. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, this isn't fun. I'm going to have to stop doing it.
Mm.
And when I started to wake up to where I was, I mean, I had a complete emotional breakdown in the school car park, if I'm honest. A friend jumped in my car and said, I'm taking the kids for lunch. You go home, rest. I've got your kids, don't worry about it. So I went home and I slept all afternoon, and then I was like, what happened? And it was really that I just didn't stop to think what was meaningful for me, what was energizing, what felt like a contribution. So although I was working at a high level, getting paid very well, didn't really feel like I was contributing to a better world. Um, and that's the point where I was starting to think, well, what else could I do? And that's when I met Anna through my networking and took the other approach. But I think that has very much shaped the value of spring concept as well, and showed me just how important it is to be in alignment with your business, because you can do stuff you do well for a while, but it's not going to really fulfill you in a way that's meaningful. And if it's not meaningful, it's really, really hard to keep going.
Yeah, and I think when hopefully you are helping people through your work to not get to that situation of near burnout, right? And it comes back to that alignment. If you're doing what you love, which we hope for everyone, which is aligned with your true value, then people will feel that, they'll be attracted to you. You'll be naturally energized. It won't feel like an effort to get up in the morning, and that's the dream, right? That's we've both got young teenage children, and that's what I hope for them, that they will find that piece of the world that inspires them and that they can contribute to without, yeah, there's always effort, but a natural ability and a natural draw to bringing value into whatever they end up doing.
Yeah, and there's a brilliant quote in The Alchemist. I love that book, where he talks about where if the stars are aligned, then everything feels easy. You know, when you're on the right path, and when you're in alignment, it feels easier because the right people and opportunities find you. And it's incredible just how fast that happens and how quickly I see that happen for my clients. In your case as well, as you went from maybe I could sort of perhaps do this after just telling me how brilliant you are, and you're like, then full of doubt, like, yes, you can do this, to going through that process. It's like, well, this is my dream client and this is how I can serve them. And this is what I'm really excited about doing for that person and why. And then you went networking and that person walked in, but you wouldn't have recognized them if you hadn't gone through that process, and they would have missed out and so would have you. So, it really focuses you on what's meaningful, but then your radar and antenna is working, but other people naturally gravitate to you as well, and you recognize that. So it just so many good things start to happen, and it feels so much more easier. And I think we often think it has to be hard, but that's often the sign that we've wandered off the path a little bit. We've gone into the rough. We need to come back to that nice smooth path, because it should be easy. And it's just incredible just how many. So I've been doing Value Whispering now for 10 years, this process, but I still almost feel like I'm still at the beginning, because I'm still getting people come to me with new ideas and new ways to use this concept to make a difference. And this year I'm exploring a particular avenue for female founders to help them get more investment, which has come to light that this process is perfect for. So, there's just so many new opportunities still coming. I think, okay, I'm just really at the beginning of seeing how far this concept could go. And when I compare that for, the first business I was doing for 8 years, and it just felt so hard. And obviously I had young kids, so that doesn't help,
For sure.
but more the showing up and feeling that I'm in the right place, being of value, feeling really motivated. That just wasn't there at all. But it just took me a long time to dare to look for what else could I do. But yeah.
And that's that tells us that you have found your true value, and everything is lining up because you have these other opportunities. You continue to be inspired by your clients and open to the opportunities of the world opening there. You introduced the concept of the dream client, and this is one of the pieces of the blueprint that I remember really clearly and had a powerful impact on me. In fact, I can still see, I think I created 5 sort of avatars, dream clients at the time. And I know I can even see the pictures I chose for 3 of them. And that must have been 7 years ago.
Yeah, probably even more
possibly
than that.
8.
Mm.
Yeah. So I know that this was a really powerful moment for me and something I should revisit again. But one of the things you mentioned in the book is red flags, knowing when someone is not a dream client. Can you explain a little bit, what are some red flags that people should watch out for, that will help them understand that this type of client is not the right client for them?
Yeah, I think sometimes our dream client is not always as clear as a nightmare client. And I think our nightmare clients, these red flag clients, we feel it. We know this isn't the client that I should say yes to. And I've known it in the past. I don't know if you've had any
Yes,
red flag
definitely.
clients and you just knew that they were going to be a nightmare. But you still said yes because you want to help people. Maybe you're wrong. It's
You want the money.
Yeah, exactly. The money. But then they just end up draining our energy, leaving us with more self-doubt, and we have enough of that as it is anyway. We don't need more. And we just do a great job for them.
Yeah.
And I think this is the most powerful part. Like, for example, Kate, so she was another one of my OGs, and she focused in on her value sweet spot, so that space where your value and the needs of your client overlap. And so she got really clear on this, and she knew that the way she helped her clients were students, young children, to read and write in English, was to co-create the lessons with them so that they understood how they learned, and they became part of that process, and they became these lifelong learners. So she didn't use textbooks because that was too restricting. That was someone else's methodology. So she had 5 clients one week walk through the door. 4 signed on the spot and became amazing clients. And the 5th one said, but I want my kid to use a textbook so I can see what they're doing. And she said, well, that's not what I do. I recommend you go and speak to that person. And I think that was the biggest success for her almost than the 4 clients she took on, because she said, before she would have taken that client, she would have been up all night, like, oh, and now I have to find a textbook and I have to redo my whole thing. And she would moved heaven and earth to take on that client and do a good job. And she would have hated it. It would have gone against her values and her philosophy. She wouldn't have done as good a job for that client as someone who does use a textbook and is very comfortable with it. So she let that client go and felt extremely good about it. And I think when we take these red flag clients on, these people who they don't value the way we approach things, sometimes they seem a bit of a dream at first, but then they just keep asking for more and more and more. And well, that's not what I want. And they're just very unclear. You're much better off just cutting your ties with that, because they'll just drag you down. And people that just are trying to get you to do something that is out of alignment with where your true value is, you're never going to be able to serve them powerfully. They won't be happy, you won't be happy, and they're going to cause more damage in your business and hold you back more than a dream client would. So I think we need to have a bit of courage to do this, to say no when it just doesn't feel right. And there's a lot of clients that I have calls with who want to join the Value Whispering Blueprint, and on one level I know it could help them, but on another level I also know they're just not the right client for me. In terms of energy and personality, very often you can just already, now I'm more used to it, and I've worked with people that just weren't right, gone against my instincts. Now I know to be just more strict, and that yes, it would be income. And particularly with my blueprint program, it's a small group, and so I have to be really protective of that dynamic and only bringing the right people that are going to fit with the way that group works. Otherwise it's not just impacting me, but all of my clients. And it's just such a special group. Yeah, I can't put that at risk. So it takes courage, but I think we already know very often that someone is a red flag client, but they will just negatively impact your business massively. So you have to be brave and say no. But sometimes, we're never perfect. We're going to take on some clients who aren't right. And that's part of the learning journey,
I was going to
And
say sometimes you need to have had one of those to
yeah,
know that that's not right for you. And what I heard you say, so really it's all about being really clear on your own value and then listening to your intuition.
yes,
And then if we do happen to take on one of these red flag clients, to recognize that, hopefully finish the relationship as quickly and cleanly and professionally as possible, and then take that as one of those failures that feeds into us and that we can celebrate and learn from. And I remember I took on a job a little bit on the side of what I was doing a few years ago, and I really didn't like it. And then I know, okay, I don't like doing that. So that's brilliant. I don't need to think about it, doing it again. It's like, done that, tried it, wasn't for me. Let's move on.
yeah. And I think there can be red flag strategies as well, thinking about it, with the Value Whispering Blueprint in particular, I've designed it a specific way, but then I've been swayed along the way or maybe it should be a membership. So I did a membership version, but it was always the kind of second cousin of the program. It didn't have the same impacts. It wasn't designed the same way. So I sold plenty of places, it earned a good income, but it wasn't getting people the results the way that I believed they would get the best results. So I moved the ones that wanted to move, I moved into my main program, and suddenly they were getting better results because I was like, okay. So I think there's lots of red flags as you go through your business, but very often we have to experience them to attune ourselves into what those are and how to avoid them and build that trust in ourselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I loved about your book in general was how practical it is. It's not the sort of book that you sort of read and forget. You encourage us along the way to do all of these really great exercises. And there are plenty in the part one. If your listeners were to do one in the next week or so, which one would you suggest they take from part one? There was the timeline of successes, spot the value, the 5 P's reflection, and the dream clients inventory. Where should I start?
Well, I think do them in order because they do go in order for a particular reason. But I think the value exercise, really identifying your value, that's the biggest thing I see people miss. And it's what holds them back. It's what makes them go broke before they've even got started. I've heard so many heartbreaking stories of people that have invested tens of thousands in different marketing strategies and they're never going to work because they weren't clear on their value or their dream client yet. Without that, nothing else works. So really hone in on your value. And that's why when it came to titling the book, Value Whispering, it's a unknown concept because I've made it up. It's not a term that's out there. So it was a big risk in using that rather than calling it something like the smarter way to market your small business or just small business marketing or something really obvious. But it's so central, this idea of understanding your value and whispering it through everything you do. It's so central to everything else. And it's the biggest thing that people miss. They don't get it wrong in their business. They just miss it completely.
Just don't do it.
They just don't do it because they don't know it's a thing. And I don't really hear many other people talking about it.
Often we hear values, in the corporate world, and there are corporate values or business values, and they're written on the wall somewhere, usually under the mission or the vision, and they're forgotten. Is that what you're talking about?
In a way, that's part of it. But I always look at other business coaches and their programs to see what's working, to just, not to compare, but to be inspired and see how other things are structured. And each time I look at it, often it's week one is like, finding your niche and defining your message and all of the stuff that we take weeks over to get right is all packaged into 1 week. And you think, how can you possibly really understand, believe, like embody this when you go through it so quickly? And although with the value whispering, that bit takes a little bit longer, then everything else goes fast.
Yeah.
Your marketing suddenly becomes really obvious and you know what's right and wrong. Every decision becomes easier. Your confidence is there. I think people miss it because people don't talk about it, but also you have to think. I'm just, but it's so important to do that first, then everything else works. And you can do anything after doing this first part of the process. And yeah, and it's going to work much more successfully. And I think a lot of people, when I speak to them at first and they're struggling in their business, they just don't necessarily feel that they're in the right place doing the right thing. Their business feels more like an expensive hobby and they're full of doubt that they're even doing the right thing. Getting this bit right first make stops all of that. It stops the comparisonitis and all of these other things that hold us back later on. So taking like 2 or 3 weeks to really figure this bit out first, it's just such a small price to pay for everything else to work. So yes, I've forgotten the question now, but hopefully that
That's fine. And I guess one of the things is we can also adjust or revisit those as we learn more about ourselves and our business and our dream clients, right? I mean, it's not a one done and then that's solid forever, because I've seen your business evolve and possibly your values have always stayed the same, but you've probably revisited them along the way. Would that be true to say?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, your business journey, we tend to think or hope that it just goes in a nice straight line, but it's not, it's loopy. As you go through and you understand more about your dream client and your offer and blah, 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 and then you realize, oh, this is the thing. And then you go back. But then it's just a case of just fine tuning a little bit.
Yeah.
Everything is in place, but you're just fine tuning it. And that process continues, particularly, when you start out in business, you start where you are with what you know, with what you think. It's all theoretical, really, until you start to go out there and do stuff. And then at the end of every year, you'll look back and you realize, wow, I am such a different person now. And then you'll start to see bigger. And I think that's the thing with my business is that at the end of every year, I'm just saying, wow, I could do so much more with this. And at the beginning of every year, I scare myself with how big I'm thinking. And then at the end of the year, I was like, I was thinking so small.
Oh, wow.
Um, so then it is a case of just going back and fine tuning and okay, well, now I talk about the value sweet spot, which is your true value in context.
Yeah.
Is in the context of how you're going to use that to make a difference for your dream clients. But if your dream clients have shifted a little bit, then that sweet spot is going to shift a little bit. And so keeping that fine tuning process is really key. But it's very rare that it's complete reinvention. It's more of as you build that confidence, as you understand your value more, you're getting deeper and starting to think bigger as well. But knowing you can do that, you're ready for that now. Actually, we had a wrap-up session at the end of last year for my clients to see where they had come that year and what they were planning for next year. And every single one of them was like, I didn't think that any of what I've just achieved in this last sort of quarter was possible for me. And I realized that I didn't even blink doing these things. They were so full of doubt and fear, and yet they've gone outside, way outside their comfort zone without even noticing because it was in alignment with who they are and how they can create value. So it just became an obvious thing for them to do. And they're like, but having that moment to reflect on it, they realized, wow, I know you said I could do more, but I never believed it. And now I realized I've done it, and it's just so wonderful. I remember one lady said, right, okay, I'm ready for you to push me and make me do all the things that feel uncomfortable. It's like, well, that's no good because you won't do it. So, but getting to a point where all those big things actually feel like the right, obvious, easy things to do, is just magical. But that will keep evolving year on year. So keep reflecting, keep fine-tuning, and you'll amaze yourself.
Yeah. I mean, having read your book recently, it definitely encouraged me to do some of those exercises again, because I see myself, my business, my dream clients in a totally different way now.
Mm-hmm.
And so to go through some of those exercises again is on my list of things to do in the next couple of weeks, because it was really, as I was reading through and refreshing, my knowledge on the blueprint, and you've tightened it up obviously in the last 8 years, I was like, yeah, I should really do that again. That'll be an interesting exercise to do as well. So, lots of value in there. So I'm definitely going to revisit. So it's not just for new business owners that this is valuable. It's definitely something you can look, even if you're a few years into your business, something we should constantly be tweaking.
Yeah, it's interesting that my clients who are brand new in business, or perhaps have been in business for maybe 12 months, and those that have been in business for 15, 20 years, it's the same process they all go through, and they all have fresh realizations. And those that have been in business for a long time, they've just continued to do what they're asked to do. They've never stopped and thought, well, how can I really create an impact? What really is my methodology here? What have I learned? And going back and refreshing that, it's just incredible to see what they come up with, and just how they take a huge leap in the kind of clients they work with and the impact they have. And then of course the income follows naturally from that as well. But it's so interesting to see how it's exactly the same process. And I once won a day of business coaching with a lady, and she coaches clients who are at 9 figures in their business. So complete opposite end of the scale to my typical clients who are, straddling 6 figures. 6 figures. And when I told her, I took her through my process, she's like, well, this is what I teach my clients. So it's the same at every single level, but it's just a case of keep reflecting, keep fine-tuning, and keep growing through that as well. Because that I think that's something we don't necessarily do enough. But that it's the key to growing and having a business that's really impactful and meaningful, that we love and feel so proud of, and can't wait to take to that next level.
Brilliant. So that's the foundation of value whispering. And we come to the end of our first episode, covering the part 1 of the book. And in the next episode, we will be exploring how to translate that true value, clarity, into marketing and sales that really resonate with the dream clients.
Yes, I'm excited for that step. But you've asked some amazing questions, Helen. Thank you so much. Got me thinking today. I was like,
Good.
I'm looking forward to our next phase.
Me too. Thanks so much, Melitta.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. It really felt like we've gone full circle, with Helen being my very first client, the very first person to test out and try value whispering, and now to be the person who's reflecting back on its evolution, the book, and her experience in between our very first coaching session together, and today being a confident entrepreneur and an author herself. I think it really serves as a powerful reminder of just how much can change and grow when you really understand your own true value. And if anything we've talked about today resonated with you and you'd like to explore the ideas more deeply, then my book, Value Whispering, The Smarter Way to Market Your Small Business, that just happens to be brilliant for introverts, is now available on Amazon. It's currently in Kindle form. The paperback takes a little bit longer, and then the Audible will be out in a couple of months' time. But I'd love for you to get a copy of that book. It's really designed to help you put words to your value in a way that feels calm, aligned, and genuinely you, and then weave that through everything you do, so you naturally stand out as your client's obvious first choice without feeling forced or fake or burning out in that process. And if you are already reading it, I hope that this episode has added another layer of insight and helped make those ideas come to life for you. And do let me know how you are getting on with the book. If you have any questions, reach out. You'll find me on LinkedIn at Melitta, or better still, leave a review on Amazon. Reviews really are gold dust, and they help more people to find the book and benefit from the wisdom inside. You'll find all the links, as always, in the show notes at melittacampbell.com/podcast. And I'll be back with Helen next week looking at part 2 of the book, which is where all the marketing and sales goodness can be found. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. Meantime, have a fantastic week. I'm Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.